I recently got the chance to speak with Deanna Broaddus, who blogs over at recoveringwomenwealth.com. She's got a just incredible story of how she became sober from drugs and alcohol back in 2010. 7 years later, using the Dave Ramsey snowball method, she became debt free in 2017. And we had a conversation that had everything to do with headspace, about mental tips and tricks that helped her during her recovery, and which it turns out is overall just good advice for living, whether you're trying to stop yourself from making bad decisions regarding addictive substances, or whether you're just trying to improve your relationship with money and its many trappings. Let's hear what Deanna has to say.
Staying in the moment is huge. And especially in early sobriety, people say, I can't imagine not drinking the rest of my life. And the common answer is just focus on not drinking today or not doing that today. And I actually have a good friend that used to say, I'm just not going to drink today, but if I still feel like this tomorrow, I'm going to drink. And that would get her through. Sometimes, and sometimes I fast a lot, sometimes for spiritual and health reasons. And that's challenging. I find that obviously strengthens my self-control muscles, which is good. And I'll have to use tricks like that. Like I sometimes think, well, this is what I'm going to eat tomorrow because I can't eat today. But I think staying in the moment, not trusting my first reaction is another day-to-day thing. And that's just because a lot of times my first reaction my bent is towards how I was formed in the formative years, which wasn't the healthiest. I developed some unhealthy coping skills when dealing with in particular authority figures and a little bit of a rebellious nature. And I also just believe some incorrect things about myself. So sometimes my first reaction is, what did I do wrong? I'm an idiot, and I've learned to not trust that and pause and then reflect on the situation rather than react. So that's the big thing. I've learned in recovery, I can't control what other people say or do. None of us can, but I can control how I react and also who and what I allow into my life too. That can become part of the picture. But ultimately it's pausing, in particular if I'm offended and I'm noticing some emotions well up inside of me, and pausing before I really react. I've gotten myself in trouble, who doesn't make mistakes, but I've reacted in unhealthy ways, or I've taken offense incorrectly just because it maybe triggered a wound of my past or a memory. And, then the other person is left wondering like, wow, what did I do? So, and then I just have to, apologize and reflect after the fact. But I like it much better if I can pause before I react.
Can you talk to me more about that moment of pause? It seems to me that the more emotional a situation is, the harder that pause becomes.
Usually I'll have to remove myself from the situation because I like to solve things quickly. I am definitely a doer and a problem solver. And sometimes it's the right time to do that is not right then and there because I'm so wrapped up into it. And so, for example, at work, I have the director of operations. I've gotten myself in trouble a couple times from sending my boss texts or emails late at night and causing, maybe because I was upset about something and then I put it on him and then it's caused him a sleepless night. And so my director of operations said, you've got a new rule. You can't send him any messages after 5 o'clock. He did. And now it's created a good habit of like really checking myself. So I had to have that rule in place to know that like there's a time and a place in which to express myself and like to not cause stress for anybody. Let's just call it quits after a certain time. And not that I'm overly causing issues at work, but it just happened enough times that we thought that would be a good rule for me. And it helped me. And then in the moment of pause, like I said, I find if I remove myself from the situation and take a walk, go exercise, change the scenery, not necessarily talk about it with somebody else, because then it can turn into gossip and that doesn't get me anywhere. So just kind of removing myself, getting some physical exertion, and then taking a little time before I actually come back and reflect on the situation, because I have a fresh perspective. I have, you know, I've been able to remove myself from that instant reaction or emotion that I felt.
I love this idea of the pause and of emotionally or possibly physically removing yourself from a situation. Have you used those same strategies in your financial life?
Yeah, and I definitely think there's a correlation here with financial independence, because I think the typical reaction in this country is to spend money, to be into debt, go into debt and buy what you want, right? It's very easy to do all those things. And also too, I don't drink or drug anymore, but there's other things to escape to, like eating too much or spending money or shopping. So I have to also try to catch myself that I'm not doing something as an escape too. So I focus on that a lot. So that's caused me to pause if I'm buying something and really think about, like, is this something of value, or am I just trying to escape the moment, or, you know, and it just causes me to think outside of the box in all areas of life too. And so I definitely apply that to my financial life. Absolutely.
Do you have the rule that something has to remain in your Amazon basket for at least 24 hours before you'll think about even buying it?
I don't have strict rules like that, but I don't buy things like on first grab. I really think about it if I need something. So I guess I kind of loosely have that rule. But yeah, I never just go buy something unless of course it's something minute that I need. But if it's a bigger purchase, I wait.
This whole idea of systems that you can put in place to prevent you from making bad decisions or systems that help you build good habits, all of that's really popular now. Alternately, the idea of depending on willpower is really on the outs. How much do you depend on sheer willpower to make the right decisions?
Not much. I'll tell you the only time I think I depend on will, but I just found it only can take you so far, and I think the real power is in the surrender and asking for help. And so, as a person of faith, obviously asking God for the help and the strength that I need. And then just in the natural, asking accountability partners, whether it be financially or with my sobriety. And that accountability aspect is huge, I think. And that could take us so much further than willpower. And for example, gosh, in exercising, so I do a lot of my exercise in group fitness classes just because I like that level of accountability of a bunch of other people being in class with me. And I'm motivated to keep going, and when I want to quit because everybody else is going, or the instructor might, and there's somebody might say, hey, why are you leaving? So that accountability is huge. And then with my financial life, if I'm occasionally I'll have somebody look at my budget or my expenses and just tell me if, did they see anything out of line? I've done that for other friends. And, with my sobriety, if I think I'm getting, you know, off track mentally in an unhealthy place, or there's just a big decision I need some help with, I definitely reach out to people on accountability. But and then to your question about the system, so if willpower can only get me so far, yes, I think the systems in place are going to get me further, and they're going to get people much further. So I allow some flexibility because I enjoy spontaneity. I've just discovered that about myself. That keeps my life exciting. So I do allow some flexibility, but I routinely do things like get a good night's sleep, eat well, exercise, read, pray, meditate. Those are pretty much daily activities that I incorporate every day into my life. And I have a good story about that. I don't see this psychiatrist anymore, but when I first got sober, I saw a psychiatrist that I had seen for years. And the first question she would always ask me when I would show up was, all right, how's your faith? Are you exercising? And are you sober? And those were always, and I thought about it after a while. I'm like, she always asked me the same questions. And then we'd go from there. And I came to realize that she knew if one of those three things were off, then I was probably going to be depressed, or I was off.
So I don't want this to sound like a shameless plug, but on this notion of systems and accountability, etc., and because I know you also use On Trajectory, I'd love to hear how does it fit into the rest of the systems in your life, when it comes to building good money habits.
So and before I found On Trajectory, I was making projections, but based on a little bit more generous assumptions of what the market would return. And, I felt loosely confident about it. But then when I used On Trajectory and was a little bit more with your guidance, a little bit more realistic about an average rate of return, that was one thing. And then just really thinking about the different stages of my life. So I love that I know right now what my rent costs, but in several years, I'm expecting to own a home. So I'm going to project what my mortgage might be at that point. And then at some point, the home is going to be paid off. So I'm not going to have a mortgage. So I just could account for all those different fluctuations of my life. Health insurance, right now I pay nothing because I get it through my job, but at some point I'm going to have to pay for it, and at some point I'm going to be on Medicare. And so I could just put all those different variables in and get a big picture. And I found it increased my confidence about my projections about my retirement.
Which, of course, is the exact reason that On Trajectory exists. Um, One of the things that I found most surprising about making a lifelong financial plan was it actually helped me think less about my finances. It helped me achieve, like a certain peace of mind. Did that happen for you?
Yes, and I would say in different uh, at different times. So when I first started paying off my debt and got on a budget, I found freedom in knowing what I could spend on what, so that where I could kind of forget it, just stick to the plan, to the budget. And then when I got out of debt, I was maxing out my retirement accounts, and then shortly thereafter, I met you and I started utilizing On Trajectory. And as I mentioned early on, I'm kind of a set it and forget it type of person. I don't check the market all the time. I don't look at my accounts. I'm maxing them out, and my post-tax accounts, I'm putting in as much as I can. And I've kind of figured out the sweet spot inside of On Trajectory, and I go in quarterly and update it, but I'm not obsessing over it. So yeah, I would say I feel a lot of peace of mind about it.
Awesome, awesome. That's great to hear. And, getting there is not necessarily easy. I remember reading an article once that said doing math when you really don't want to be doing math, but someone's making you do it, is as painful psychologically as putting your hand on a hot stove. But of course, the good news is that making a financial plan is really something you do once. And that initial part might be painful, examining your spending and making a budget and all of that. But afterwards, it's pretty easy to maintain and just, making sure that you're staying on track.
I can make a fun analogy to that to in recovery. So in recovery, you do, if you follow a typical recovery plan, there's these steps, and there's this fourth step where you take an inventory of like everything in your past, relationships, resentments, and it's a huge process, and it's similar. Everybody dreads it and they feel like they're putting their hand on a hot stove when they do it. And then, but the idea is that's like the spring cleaning of the house. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of work, but once you get it done, then the key is maintenance, which is probably similar to On Trajectory. So then later on, there's a 10th step where as new things come up, you write it out, you work on it so that it doesn't build up again. So you don't have to do that big inventory all over again. You're just kind of maintaining. So I feel similar with tracking my finances and projecting my retirement with On Trajectory and budgeting. Like it's a maintenance that I'm never going to have to do that initial, like you said, sitting down
Yeah.
and doing all those calculations again.
All of that is just excellent. Well, we don't have much time left. Can you take a few minutes and talk about what's going on in your world? I know you used to be over at Miss Biology, but you've got something new going on. So tell us about it.
Yeah, I rebranded to Recovering Women Wealth, and just to target the audience that I knew I was best suited to speak to anyway. And so I blog once a week. I post a new article, sometimes twice a week, and just kind of finding my audience. So I'm getting my traffic back up to where it was, and now reaching out to find more women all over that are in recovery. So that's exciting to see that grow. And then thinking about how I can scale it. So I do some one-on-one mentoring locally, and then I do some teaching of financial literacy at some sober houses, and just really thinking about how to scale that, not just to be a local thing. So whether it's maybe an online course or a book, I've kind of been playing these things over in my mind. I haven't taken too much action on either one yet, but we'll see. Maybe something like that.
That is great. And I love that you've created this unique niche and that you're not afraid to lay yourself out there. I'm sure your example will be a wonderful influence to many people and for a long, long time. Thanks for chatting with me today.